point for my presentation today. Why this is important is this situation. We have doubled our consumption of resources during a very, very short period of time. And we can see this change in a lot of different areas. For example, when it comes to earth consumption. And this is on the overall world base. But we can see this is a problem. We can see that our climate is changing. And I will come more back to why we have this situation. Now, in this presentation, I will only focus on some of the trends and curves. We can see that the global material use, demand per capita, and material productivity has increased rapidly. I can see changes. I remember the first time I was here in Thailand, and I can see the changes now. Compare. Sometimes, if you are in the middle of something, you don't see how things change. We can also note that the material productivity has gone down, or at least declined a bit since around 2000. And this is a problem. We are utilizing more and more resources, but how we use the resources is going down. And if you look at this type of trends, we can see that the Anthropocene time area we are in now has a common thing. And that is that we are living like there are no end. All curves goes to infinity, more or less. And we now know that we are living on a planet with limited resources. And this is a challenge. This is a challenge not only from a environmental perspective, but also for our society. Because how to provide the services and have a good living in the future if we don't have resources. And this is a challenge not only for governments, but also for companies, organizations. They are looking for ways for how can we continue to do business if we have less resources in the future. And even though a lot of companies are not talking about it, they're working on it. And here's another figure showing instances of structural waste in our society. For example, cars. How many of you have a car? None of you. Surprising. In Sweden, it's quite common that you have a car. And the car is not that much used. It's only used 4 or 5% maximum all the time. Most of the time, it's just standing still. Still, it requires a lot of resources, blocks a lot of resources, and resources that are then used quite inefficiently. Instead, it would be much better, also from a provider perspective, to have a car that can be shared by more users. If you're a producer of cars, what if you stop selling the car, instead try to find systems where you actually have several customers sharing the same car, using less resources? We have built an environment. A lot of offices in Europe are, for most of the time, empty. People are on business trips, doing other things. And we can see that during the COVID. And it continued to be a lot of empty spaces. And we also have food waste, a big problem. We are throwing away a lot of food before it comes to the shops because it's not the cucumber is not straight enough or other small things, or we are buying food that gets too old in our homes and then we are throwing it. And we have this type of planetary boundaries that we are constantly crossing the borders of. This is, have you heard about them, planetary boundaries? Stockholm's Resilience Center started to publish those in 2009, Johan Rockström, and they have further developed them over the years. From the beginning it was 7 boundaries, in 2009 it was 3 crossed, then they further developed it into 9 boundaries, and published in 2023, and of those 6 are crossed. And we are researchers. We, as researchers, actually has enabled this situation. We have enabled this society. We are the ones that have, of course, created a good environment, good living conditions for a lot of people, but etc. But we have also caused a lot of problems. But I'm really positive because I do think we, even if we have caused this, we actually have also the power and the means to actually solve it. But we need to step up. We need to do it faster because things are not looking great. We need to develop new knowledge and disseminate knowledge to society in a faster way. Otherwise, it might end up like this. And who wants to do research on a dead planet? It's quite pointless. We need to do things before it's too late. And in order to solve it, we need to be better in communicating and publishing our results and the important ones. We need to think what should we focus on? And that is what I will actually encourage you to do. Be more selective what you do research on, and think about what is the right thing to do, rather than trying to make current a bit more efficient. I will come back to that later today. But first of all, I would like to start with a very, very simple question. What is a good product? Because what I've been talking about so far is that we're using a lot of resources like that, for creating a lot of products. But what is a good product? Please talk with your friend for a few seconds, neighbor sitting next to you, or think yourself. What is a good product? Any ideas? What is a good product?
For me, basically, it's fit for use.
Fit for use, yes. Something else?
Reasonable price.
Reasonable price, yes. To buy it, yes.
Yes. And
More?
live long.
Live long,
Yes.
yes.
Not harmful for environment. Not
And
harmful.
also
Not harmful, yeah.
easy to use.
Easy to use.
Reusable.
Reusable. I think a lot of people are not really thinking about this when buying products. They're just buying. And quite often we are mainly focusing on the price. And I think this is something that we've also been taught to. I'll come back to that later today. Because we should not think about all the things that we should think. But some people want us not to think too much. We should just buy. But I would say a good product, at least for me, is something that is used over time and requires not that much resources. Because if it's durable but not used, it's quite pointless. But it should be something that is attractive for me over time. So I want to use it, and I want to use it over time. So it should be durable. And so it's a question about time as well, and value over time. And I think that is important. So when buying products, for example, we should have more concerns about how much will we use something over time, and also what is the total cost of ownership over time, not just the price. And I will come back to that because in a lot of cases, the actually main predominant cost is not during the use phase. Sorry, not during, it's not from buying it, it's actually during the use phase. But what is then a good paper? Thesis. What is a good paper or thesis? New knowledge? Yes.
Different new perspectives, yes. I would say you can see a thesis or a paper as a product. It's actually a product. And as a product, I would say a good paper, of course, should have some new knowledge, but it's also important to make, it's good if the paper or product is attractive over time, solve real problems, and provide useful knowledge. A paper that is really attractive, not just for the second or for the moment, but actually has an impact. Just not to get a citation or something published. And something that really gets cited, not only cited as a reference, but something that actually is cited because it provides value that other ones can build knowledge on. And I think this is important. Nowadays, a lot of focus is just on publishing, not really on what is a useful paper, what can provide value over time. And coming back to the knowledge, what type of knowledge? What is really useful knowledge? I see, as an editor of Journal of Clinical Reproduction, I see a lot of papers nowadays that are just minor, small modifications of something that has already been published or similar, instead of trying to make something that is really useful, really bringing up new knowledge. And I see that as a problem, because in a lot of areas, what counts is just number, not the value of the paper. And it's like a product. Once again, I want to make a connection to products. If you have a product, let's say you have a product, and someone is offering you a product that is more or less the same as the product you already do have, then most likely you're not that interested in buying that product if there are just small, minor changes or improvements. But if you can see that that product has really substantial new things, new features, then you're more attracted to that product. It's also more likely that other ones are also more attracted to that product. Then it becomes more well-known, more famous, and more spread. So I think that is also a thing. When I started to do research in this area, I could see that it was a couple of hundred of papers in this subject area published every year. For example, Journal of Clinical Reproduction. It was not that many. Now, last year, it was 40,000 plus, maybe close to 50,000 manuscripts submitted to the Journal of Clinical Reproduction. And I would say a lot of those are just minor modifications of previous studies instead of substantial ones. And I see that as a problem, especially if we want to build knowledge that can help us create a better world. Okay, so we need to improve our society, and we are using papers as a mean to actually disseminate knowledge. But then how to really find good papers? Topics, things to write about. And here I mentioned it before. I think we have a problem in society, and a really huge problem, not only in research, but I would say in general, and that is our focus on making things more efficient. We are constantly trying to do that. And that is a problem. And why is it a problem? The problem, I would say, is because if we're looking into how our society has developed, we can see that a lot of the things that we are trying to make more efficient is also causing our problems. And now we're just making those things even more efficient. And the efficiency thing should never be the starting point. The starting point for doing something should always be to think about what is the right thing to do, and then make that efficient. what is the right thing to do? And for example, that implies that some of the things that you've been doing or someone else has been doing maybe should not be continued. It should be abandoned. Instead, going back in time, we were buying CD records. And before that, we had other devices, but CD. And really, who wanted it CD? No one. We wanted the music. And that's why, for example, Spotify and that type of companies, they thought, okay, let's focus on what is really value creating here. And that is a service that provides music, not plastic parts. And I do see this as I mentioned, in a lot of research. I see research projects that are just following what others have been doing without thinking what should be done. Not stating that we should not focus on making things efficient, but we should constantly reconsider, is this still really the right thing to do? And one way to do this, and I think this goes back to design principles, basic 4 ones that we always should think about when solving problems. And that is, starting point, really understand the problem. What before how. And in many, many cases, I see that what researchers are trying to do is, or papers are focusing on, is symptoms rather than really the problem. And if you're solving symptoms, I would say then you will never really have a good impact. Instead, in many cases, it's because people want to, as fast as possible, try to solve problems before they have actually understood the problem. And we should have more focus on really understanding what, ask the question why, before progressing. And also understand the needs, and I will come back to that because it could be needs from different areas. And then, of course, after doing that, we should do the abstraction of the problem. We should generate many ideas and concepts. And once again here, I see a lot of cases where in papers, when that is not done, the researcher has already come up with an idea and then it's not really challenging the idea or ideas or solutions. And then, of course, to do this in a systematic approach. And going a little bit more into details, you can see and talk about 9 stages here. And I would say the starting point here should be really in the beginning, because, sorry for the language, shit in, shit out. If you don't really understand what, it's quite pointless what you do afterwards if you start to solve something. You really need to identify stakeholder needs. That could be academia, industry, and policymakers' needs. Preferable if you get all the different perspectives. Because if you can provide something that is valuable for more, it's more likely that you will be cited and also your findings will have an impact. But you should really try to understand and then clarify the problem in the proper way so it's easy to understand. And once again, go back to really ask yourself why. For example, let's say you look tired, and I ask you, why are you looking tired? And you tell me, oh, I couldn't sleep tonight. And then maybe if I don't reflect too much, I start to create a solution for how you can sleep better. But the thing is, that isn't just a symptom, because maybe you're not sleeping that good because you have had a lot of work, so you didn't have time to sleep. And then maybe I start to think about the solution, if I don't consider and reflect too much, how you can sort your work a little bit better. But what if the problem is not that you have too much work to do? The problem is that you have a manager that is not good in organizing the work, causing you to have this situation. So then maybe I should focus, in order to make you be able to sleep better, I should find a system for how can I help your manager to organize the work in a better way. And then, of course, research, brainstorm solution. Come back to that. You need to have a broad perspective and develop and prototyping, testing and testing and testing. And the important here is really to understand all the different perspectives. I think you have seen this slide before, or this type of graph before. How the customer explained it, how the product leader understood it, how the analyst designed it, etc., etc. The thing here is that sometimes it's really hard to understand different actors' perspectives. And especially if you're not really interested in doing it. So you need to engage. Try to think in their perspective. What could be useful for them? If you were in their situation, how could you contribute? What type of information would you like to know? And I think that it is very important if you want to advise and help them. And don't be afraid of asking questions. Don't be afraid of asking maybe stupid questions, because I would say there are no such things as stupid questions. And I think this is very, very important. But then it comes to another thing, because as I mentioned, the price sometimes is just a minor part of the whole. For example, a lot of people are focusing on the purchasing cost, even though for a lot of cases that is just a minor. Now it states 25 and 75. It can be different, but the hidden costs are quite often quite substantial. For example, training and education, salary costs, consumables and or parts, installation costs, user preferences, etc., etc. Cost that is quite often neglected or hidden or hide it from you because the provider don't want you to focus on them. But if you want to solve something, you need to consider the whole life cycle, the whole system. You can't just pinpoint one thing, because if you do so, it's a huge risk that you do sub-optimization, that you optimize a minor part on the cost and causing increased cost elsewhere. So the total cost will be higher. Another thing that is puzzling me a lot is shown on the next slide. And I mean, we are researchers. When I was young, I was told our researchers, they are the ones sharing ideas with each other, etc., etc. But when I started to grow up and became a PhD student and started to do this, I realized I see a sad tendency that more and more researchers are more trying to keep the ideas for themselves, not really sharing, discussing, especially not in the early phases. They want to develop everything until it's more or less perfect. And I do see this as a huge problem, because we can also see that society and our lives, everything becomes more and more complex. So it's impossible for one or even a few to actually have all the competences needed in order to do relevant research nowadays. We need to have a multiple disciplinary research. And we should actually listen to what Shaw mentioned here. This is about sharing apples and sharing ideas. Because it might be that my idea is, for you, sounds very, very crazy. But if I mention my really premature idea, okay, yeah, sorry. If I mention my premature idea to you, it will trigger something in you, because maybe you have the knowledge and understanding that I don't have, that can actually enable it to something better. And then if you give your thoughts back, oh, I can develop it even further, and then we can engage some more people, really getting an idea that is better and more mature and have a bigger audience. And I think this is important. We should have more knowledge sharing in earlier phases. And we also need to have a climate where it's accepted to pop up ideas, premature ideas, that is not really finalized. And that is not only research, it's in society in general. We should not be afraid of losing face. And I can't stress this more than, because this is really, really important. I would say that is one reason why I have been quite successful, because I from beginning didn't care. I mentioned idea that from beginning was maybe not fully matured, but since I mentioned them, I managed to engage other people to actually create them to something better. And when talking about ideas and sharing ideas, my recommendation is also focus on and give feedback in a positive way. Because we, as people, we like to work with positive things. We don't want to work with problems. If we talk about problems, we have a tendency to old ideas. But if we talk about positive things, we are more daring and eager. And I think that is important. So, now to put, I need to check the time. Now to actually put things together a little bit. Here I will come and have some quite concrete things. So it's a lot of text, but then I saw it as maybe a checklist and guideline for you that you can utilize afterwards. Sorry. In line with what I meant, in order to make things more published, more spread, your good ideas more impacting, it's important that you try to collaborate effectively. Work with co-authors to improve quality and research a broader audience. Try to collaborate in new constellations. Don't try to write everything yourself. Engage people early on in the process. Choose references strategically. Avoid only citing the most common sources, including diverse and relevant references. Here I think it's important that you consider, because I can see a lot of papers that are using the same references as everyone else is doing without really reflecting. And sometimes those references are a little bit old because areas are developing. Try to think what references could be useful for my paper, not just copy the references everyone else has been using. Try to make yourself relevant. And also consider that some references don't age well. Then engage in networking. Connect with peers, attend and present at conferences, and participate in discussions. Don't be shy. And be, don't be shy, and don't be afraid. It's when I was a student once upon a time, my teacher told me, Matthias, I hope you never need to have that you never will have a work that implies that you will need to speak English because you are so bad in English. And that didn't work on me because I thought I will try anyway, because the trick here is talk. I mean, in the beginning I was bad, but since I dared to talk, at least you can understand what I'm saying today. And today with our new technology means it's quite easy to translate and do things. But dare to contact, dare to connect. Expand beyond your research domain. Share your findings with researchers in related or interdisciplinary fields. And engage them in writing. It's like I've been really interdisciplinary. I've been doing research in law, in material science, in economics, in environmental technologies, etc., etc. And try to connect my knowledge with their knowledge, implying that I've had quite a lot of impact. Because it's also so that if you connect with someone from another area, not only will people from my area make maybe hopefully references to my paper, but also from the other area. And that is interesting, especially if you can connect 2 free areas. Really recommend that. Use open access when possible. Increase your visibility in publishing. So open access, if possible. Or try to use different types of services that enable you to post pre-versions of your paper. So it's easy for people to find you. Promote your work. And I think that is important. Put it your new published papers in your email, in the end of your emails. People get to know. Make short abbreviations. Make short summaries, popular science summaries of your papers. So, much better, much higher as well. Promote your work. Because if you don't promote it, who should promote it? If you don't believe in and trust your own results, who should do it? Ensure clarity and accessibility. Write in a way that makes your research understandable to a broad audience. I can see more and more papers doing the opposite. I would say they are trying to make things overcomplicated, just to make it more scientific. Putting in a lot of formulas, mathematical equations and so on, that makes no sense. And sometimes, yes, maybe good to lower it a little bit. So make it simple. Don't use a lot of strange words. Make it simple. Make it so even your kids or your grandmother can read it. That is a good. Because if you manage to do that, then it's a good paper. Share your papers on preprint. I've mentioned that earlier, ResearchGate. Engage in public communication. Write opinion papers, summaries, and try to really disseminate. Invite yourself to certain events to share your knowledge. And use keywords and search engine optimization strategies. For example, if you have now it's really loud. If you have a paper, really think about the title. Make the title as the last thing. And make the title really interesting, because if someone is searching, what is the first thing they will see when searching? They will see the title. And if the title is not that interesting, most likely they will skip to next. So really consider what words you're using in the title. And the keywords, they should not be words already found in the title, because that makes no sense. Keywords should be different things. And sometimes you can have keywords that maybe attract people from other areas where they could be relevant for them. Is it mine? No? So try to think about keywords. Then we come to the abstract. In the abstract, now this is very, very concrete. Focus on in the beginning, the first 3 sentences, because that is the first thing after the title someone will read. Focus on your findings, your results. Don't focus on background information. That can come later. But a lot of abstracts I read are just old things in the beginning. And then in the end of the abstract, you maybe find something new. Instead, focus on, turn it upside down, focus on the most important thing in the beginning. Collaborate with industry and policymakers. Make your research more applicable by engaging with professionals outside academia. And I recommend you to actually approach them. Don't wait for them to come to you. Talk, send in short summaries of your papers. Try to search for people that actually could utilize your knowledge or benefit from your knowledge. Because in many cases, they appreciate that. They have problems to follow everything. It could be industry people, etc. So be proactive, don't reactive. Monitor and respond to citations. Check who is citing you and in what way they are citing you, because that could be a starting point for a collaboration. That you maybe write a paper together, you merge your knowledge or your ideas. A very important way of improve your impact. Translate or summarize for all other audiences. I mentioned that, but I think that is, especially today's technology, I see a problem that here in Thailand you publish a lot in Thai. And I'm not a native. And that for me is a problem, because I would like to read a lot of what you have been publishing here in Thailand, but for me it's not accessible. And I think a lot of that knowledge would be beneficial for us, non-Thai speaking. And with today's technology, it's possible. So maybe what you do is write your paper in Thai and make Google Translate or ChatGPT translate into English or French. Make a copy. But make it easier for us to exchange knowledge. Develop follow-up studies. Keep your research relevant by building on previous findings with new publications. But don't make just minor changes, make bigger changes. Don't be paper mills. That is, I would say, is a problem today, that some researchers, especially in China, or in India, they are producing many papers basically on the same thing. They're just making some modifications. Completely irrelevant papers. I think it's very important in order to have effective research communication. It's important to have the visualization and storytelling. Once I mentioned earlier that don't try to overcomplicate things. Try to make the language, the thing you try to present in an easy way. For example, by having nice figures, easy to read figures. Don't overload the figures with a lot of data. I see that as also a problem, because some research, you want to add in too much in the same thing. Then it's better to take it step by step. Further, maybe you have a more basic figure that you further in a paper develop and add in more and more information into. And also think about the storytelling. Make it easy to read. Really try to think from the beginning, what is the story you want to tell? What should the reader have with them after reading your paper? What is the main message? And there I recommend a lot of people, actually, instead of starting to write from the beginning, start in the end. What are the main conclusions you want to pinpoint? What are the 2-3 main points? And then that you can put in your conclusion. And based on that, then you know what type of discussion you need to have in order to end up with those conclusions. And when you know what type of discussion you need. Then you know what theory you need to add into the paper, and you also need how to describe the method, and also what should be the research questions and objective, and also background. So think about the paper from the back to the beginning, from the end to the beginning, not from beginning to the end. And a really good paper should be possible to read from both ways. Why could this approach be good also from another perspective? If you read something, at least if I read something, normally I check, okay, this title sounds interesting. Then I need the first sentences in the abstract. And if that still is interesting, I go to the conclusion of the paper. And if the conclusion is interesting, I go to the discussion. And if that is also good, most likely I read the rest of the paper. But I never start reading a paper from the beginning. I'm not sure how you do it, but a lot of people, they want to save time, so they only read the things that is important. Don't make things overcomplicated. I mentioned that several times. And don't overload your paper with a lot of references, irrelevant references, just to show that you know the area. If you have a lot of references, then tell the reader why you think those references are relevant. What are the differences, similarities between the different references, not just put a lot of them together. Integrating interactive feedback is also good. If you can have an engagement with the readers, get comments from the readers, engage the reader to actually contact you, that is also positive, because then you can get feedback, maybe how you can write a new paper, or how to develop what you do have. And also have strategies for how to respond to reviewers effectively. Already when writing, I've seen some authors, they are really making the reviewers upset. And that is not a good strategy. Because as an author, you should always think about the reviewers as your best friend, actually. They are spending their own time reviewing your papers for free, trying to give you good advice as how to improve the papers, and then try to utilize that in a good way. Don't be angry on the reviewers. I read the feedback 2 years ago that was really, really not that polite. The author was very, very upset because I sent out a paper to a bunch of reviewers because I thought maybe 2, 3, 4 will accept. But within a few hours, because I went to sleep, it was 11 that had accepted to review the paper. And I got 11 very, very good reviews. And then the author came back to me. He was so upset. Why had he to respond to 11 reviewers? 11 reviewers that have given him a lot of good comments, but he didn't throw that. But really, really good comments. And he couldn't understand that. And I would say, he should be very, very happy that 11 within a few hours accepted to read his paper and give all the time they spent. And also the fact that if you get good reviews, a reviewer most likely also will cite you if they think the paper is good in the end. Because quite often they are in your area. So be kind to reviewers. They might be the first ones to cite you. And yes, expanding research impact beyond journals. Over the years, I've been working a lot with other things than just journals. And the starting point for that was that, I mean, who really reads papers, scientific papers? There are very, very few ones reading them. And also theses. Very, very few. But something that a lot of people really read and are well accepted around the world are standards and policy documents. So I started to actually engage myself into development of eco-design standards, and later on the new standards for circular economy. Because I thought, if I can contribute to those standards, integrating knowledge, that research knowledge, not only from myself, but also from my colleagues, this is a good way of contributing to improve society. Because standards are things that companies and other organizations are buying and quite often certify against. They are spending a lot of time, and they are really read. So I started to do this, and a lot of the standards, what they try to do is actually shape industry standards and best practices. So here are actually 3 examples of examples where I built in knowledge into standards. This is from the first about circular economy. It was a British Standard Institute that published this in 2017. This figure I developed together with 2 colleagues, Erik Sundin and Tomiko Sakau. And when they wrote this standard, they asked me, could we utilize your figure? I will not go into detail now what this figure means, but I'll come back to that later. Later on now, in the new standard for ISO standard about circular economy, once again, it's implemented. I also, in the IEC, Environmental Conscious Design Standard, from 2019, in the appendix, I have research results from my... and I really recommend you to engage, because I've got comments, more comments from that than from my theses. But not only that, also try to expand research impact beyond journals by writing white papers, technical reports, and patents, and engage with policymakers and industry networking. For example, here are 3 examples. You can find, utilizing those, you can find a paper. Maybe this QR code doesn't work, but you can read the title and find it. This report I supported by, because they contacted me, and I helped them develop this figure. This is International Chamber of Commerce that published a report about circular economy. But this is based on our research. I also wrote a policy document together with Carl Dahlhammer about circular economy. That was quite heavily cited. And I also wrote this, also together with Carl Dahlhammer, developing policies for smart and inclusive circular transition for Europe. All 3 reports quite heavily cited. And I recommend you to do this as well. Try to engage. And I have more examples, but these are just 3 examples. Finally, before we start the Q&A, because we came and started a little bit late, here I also, and maybe you have received it, I put together a checklist guideline for your papers and theses. And this, if you use this QR code, you can download the document. This document I have been developing over now 8 or 9 years. I don't remember when I started. This document is quite hands-on, and it's based on not only my experience, but my colleagues' experiences and others' experiences, also master thesis and PhD students' experiences, for what to think about when writing. It's quite hands-on. It talks about general things, it talks about how to structure, etc., and what to write where. So it consists of quite a lot of useful things. Sometimes, I would say most of it is quite obvious.